Hey guys, Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com back again for another session of High Power University. This is an update session about both the Springfield SA-35 and the Girsan MCP35 and their host of models and variants that they've came out with. But we're talking more specifically about function and technical stuff, and this is add-on material to our original evaluation and analysis material of the Springfield SA-35, which happened in very late, most of it very late 2021, and updated a couple of times in 2022. This is an additional update to those, and this is also an additional update on the Girsan MCP35 to the evaluation that we did in early 2022 and any updates that we have had since then. This is going to be like the most common things that we're seeing in the BH Custom Shop Service Department in these two models, and some things that we have not shared before, but owners of these pistols probably are going to be interested to see this, because this sort of thing in mass production does tend to repeat. I'm going to start out with let's start out with the Girsan MCP35. This is their ops version or match version. They have ops on the slide. They call it a match model, I think. We'll see that they've added several things and copied from a lot of different sources. The beaver tail, that would come a la Nighthawk, Novak, cylinder and slide, and a host of others, I think. The flare out here at the bottom of the grip frame, personally I kind of have an affinity for that. I like it. That is a la Kareem Mark 1, Israeli high power years ago. We see the Picatinny rail that is in the frame. It's not an add-on. And when they added that on, they increased, what we're going to see here is we're going to see they increased the flatness of the surface. They eliminated some radiuses. It actually made this easier to machine than the traditional model. But anyway, that was added. They did a fiber optic sight. Now this one arrived this way at our shop, and the fiber optic is missing, and the front sight is soon to be missing. And that's going to be handled by us. We notice also in this particular model that they have an adjustable rear sight, looks like that, and they've milled the slide to get that, partially recessed. Right now there's no replacements for this. That is a traditional Mark III or Browning or FN Mark III dovetail rear. And I suppose you could slide like a Mepro night sight here. You may find that your luminaries may be too low compared to the metal behind it. At any rate, right now, no LPA sights, press out, press in. There would have to be additional milling of the slide done to accommodate a different sight. So right now, owners of this one, if they want a different sight option on that rear, which, I mean, it's already an adjustable, so it's a pretty good option as it is. If they wanted something different, it would require some milling of the slide difference, or accepting something that would just have like a gap between here and here, in more of a traditional sight. So the front, that's replaceable. It's a traditional Mark III front dovetail still. The beaver tail model is popular with some, not with others. They went with a straight trigger, and just confirming that we are clear here. They did go with a straight trigger, and that's, kind of a lot of guys' preferences. I find that my trigger finger tends to ride high because it goes for that where the radius is. There's still a radius. You can't avoid that. My finger tends to want to ride the radius. It's for a target trigger, when I'm on purposely positioning my finger, in the correct place, it probably is a good thing, or fine, but my finger tends to go towards the radius. I don't want to have a high position on the trigger because that makes the trigger about 28 pounds. So, the straight trigger, for some guys, they'll like it. Some guys, they may not. What I noticed is there's quite a bit of distinguishable over travel you find and see in my finger when I do that right there. That cleared the sear lever from the trigger lever, and you saw obvious trigger travel there rearward after after the slide started to move. So that's quite a bit of over travel in a high power trigger. Definitely sufficient for the design model anyway. So the other thing that we found two more things, actually not in this particular pistol, but one identical to it here just within the last week that came through the shop as well. We found that the BH Advanced barrel did not drop into this pistol. We have found hit and miss Springfields where the BH Advanced barrel doesn't drop in. And what we have started to understand is that the tolerance as far as the location of the locking lug cam, that's that crossbar in the frame that tilts your barrel down, the height of that appears to have a tolerance that we've not seen in high power pistols before. It can have that. Basically what we're seeing happen in both models is we're seeing the underneath side here, or the face of the feed ramp, that on some of these models is basically running into that locking lug cam. And when that happens, all you need to do is remove somewhere between about 1/10 to 3/10 of a millimeter off of this surface, right under the feed ramp. That's where the conflict is coming. But again, in both of these pistols, the BH Advanced barrel drops in, and there would be no kind of fitting necessary. We've done that same fit procedure, very hit and miss, with both the Girsans and the Springfields. It's not a big deal. This is the kind of thing, if you have a file, you can do this until everything functions freely, and then you stop, maybe polish, and the fit is made. So no big deal. It's just that locking lug cam. We noticed the placement in the frame height wise has a tolerance allowance that was not FN or Browning's tolerance allowance, or anybody else's for that matter that we've seen. So it can necessitate that fit. In the last model of the Girsan that we had that was identical to this one, when we test fired, we weren't having exactly the extraction consistency that we had expected. We looked and tested closer. We realized we were not getting the extractor hold on the empty cartridge casing in a quality way that we need in the high power design. And we then started looking closer at the extractor. And here's what I've done is I've kind of enlarged the extractor part. This is a Browning FN extractor. This is the Girsan extractor. And the part that we're really wanting to zone in on is this extractor claw, and basically the integrity of that surface. That is the surface that engages the empty cartridge casing that would be in the barrel after it's fired. The slide starts rearward. The slide and the extractor need to hold that empty cartridge casing until it reaches the ejector, so it will leave the pistol properly. The integrity of this extractor claw area, and we see here it's rounded, but it's a flat surface that it has to engage with. And this surface is good and flat, and we see the extractor claw area pocket is deep, and we see it's obviously more shallow, and we don't have the integrity of the engagement area with the cartridge casing. So we replaced that with an FN Browning extractor, and everything then functioned fine. We had actually a little bit of an enlargement here, and this even shows it a little bit more dramatically, but it's a very small part holding a very small edge of a rimless cartridge casing that does a very monumentally big job, and that's what we found most recently. So extraction issues, possibly. We've previously reported on that in the Springfields. We can give a little bit of an update on the extractor information about the Springfields as well. This particular Springfield is serial number 1806. And so this would have been one of the early productions. This probably would have to be assembly 14 months prior to when this video is being made, or potentially out longer than that. This one came in. This has some interesting nuances. It had a trigger that was, I guess you'd say, locking up. or not resetting properly and re-engaging the sear lever properly. And we did actually have a discharge at an unexpected time when we were test firing it. And so we had to start looking. This particular pistol is unaltered. It's all stock parts. And we're pulling a trigger brake weight of 3 pounds 8 ounces, 3 pounds 7 ounces, 3 pounds 5 ounces, 3.5 pounds, or just sub that in this pistol. Now, just for reference, with traditional parts, traditional operating system, in any high power pistol, if you're pulling a 3.5 pound trigger pull, you should not load that pistol. That pistol is a potential fire upon racking the slide, and the slide going forward, it's a potential you may have more than one round leave the handgun per trigger pull, or you may just completely magazine dump full auto style with that level of a trigger brake weight in the high power design. Reason why we say that, we're just going to explain it. When we were trigger scaling this particular high power, we trigger scaled the trigger alone. In other words, with the slide off, it took about 1.5 pounds on the trigger scale in order to pull the trigger to the rear. So, okay, we give 1.5 pounds for the trigger. The trigger levers, engagement with the sear levers, engagement with the sear, which is on an axis, which is on mounted on a sear pin, which has a relationship with a certain amount of resistance on that pin, and we have pressure coming from the hammer. So, okay, give me 0.5 pound for that series of all of those things as far as resistance. So now 1.5 pounds here, another 0.5 pound, 2 pounds. Now we're at 1.5 pounds or less to manipulate the sear to allow the hammer to go forward to the firing pin and fire. So this is a threat to fire upon loading. This is a similar nuance that we saw in the TISAS BR9 pistols. And it harkens back to that, because what guys saw was their TISAS BR9 come, to them brand new, 5.5 pound trigger pull typically would be, common. But then we had a lot of guys reporting, well, I pulled it out of the safe 6 months later, a year later, and now it's 4.5, and then it was 4, and then I pulled it out again, and now it's 3.5, and then we go, and guess what? Something came out when it shouldn't have, right? Out the end of the barrel, meaning, and always, yes, that was the answer. That's a sear spring. The flat metal spring in the frame, it was most common in the TISAS pistol. That's going to be the prescription for getting the trigger brake weight up to a respectable level as well in this particular Springfield. Another nuance, though, that we found was we found some other things that would contribute to potentially around leaving when it should not be. This particular sear lever is a floating sear lever design. It needs to be floating completely free, but it does not float completely free. It does have some resistance on it. It acts like it kind of wants to stay put when it should not be staying put. This should be very free floating, kind of rattling when I'm doing like that. That is a sear lever with a little more stationariness to it, coming forward, contacting that sear, and that's not what we want with these particular parts in this particular design. So this factor here is not helping with the nuance of any discharges that are happening. But another thing that we noticed, and this is a part of the trigger locking up problem part, and it has to do with what we see right here. I'm not sure if we can even pick this up on camera. Yeah, I think we are. Right there, you see what looks like a silver mark right there, kind of a scratch looking on the sear lever. And it's out here on the edge of the sear lever, definitely not coming in the middle. We're way out here on the edge. So what that is, that silver mark that you just saw there is happening, as it should, from this trigger lever. So this trigger lever rises when I pull the trigger. That trigger then engages the sear lever here, but optimal here would be if that trigger lever is engaging that sear lever not out here on the edge, but more centered in the center of that sear lever, so that what's happening when that trigger locks up is we've got the trigger lever from the frame that is right out here on the edge of the sear lever, and is going to tend to have interaction with this edge right there, the edge where the sear lever is supposed to live, and that's going to be contacting that trigger lever inevitably. And that is what caused our trigger to, quote, lock up, is our interaction with that edge right there. We have the same thing going on with this one, and this is a very, very, very fine kind of a fitment point, and I'm going to show it to you. Okay, now there's no way to measure this, but what I'm going to show you is right here is this angle where it comes up here on the trigger lever and it tops out. It does a 90 right across there, and right here we have an edge. You're not going to take any height off of that trigger lever. All you're going to do is just knock off the edge. Give it a little radius right there on the edge. I'm not even going to be impacting very much here at the top, a little, but again, the object here is to come right off of that edge. We don't want to make this trigger lever pointy, sharp at the top. That's not what's happening here. Again, this is a finite fit, but it's going to get this edge of the trigger lever off of the edge of the side of the channel where the sear lever goes, and it's going to resolve the engagement point, frankly, with the sear lever as well, and you're going to start to see the scratch more focused off of that edge, which is what we want. And both of these triggers would benefit, from that. Again, that's very finite. You're not, I'm not sure how to describe this, but except that edge on that trigger lever, you see a 90-degree angle. You knock off the edge so it's not a 90 anymore, and it's enough. You can go a little farther if you still don't like where you're marking. Here's an interesting little tidbit that on this subject of wanting to know where am I marking on my sear lever. A handy little thing here is like a baby powder or some kind of powder just applied right there to the end of your sear lever. Put the slide on the frame, pull the trigger and pull the slide back off, see where the mark in the powder is on your sear lever, and you'll see how your alignment is with respect to the trigger lever and its relationship with the sear lever. That, I believe, concludes everything that we had to talk about right now as far as the Springfield SA-35, the Girsan MCP35, and things that we have picked up on lately in these two models as they've come through the BH Custom Shop Service Department. Folks, thanks for watching again. I'm Mark Allen, BH Spring Solutions LLC, BHSpringSolutions.com for High Power University.